Okay, let's get started. Looks like almost everybody who registered is here. We've got a really good turnout, and hopefully everybody who is here and attending finds this really beneficial. So the reason we decided to do this webinar, obviously the construction industry is doing very well right now. The industry continues to grow. We've got BusyBusy. We've got over 35,000 construction individuals who are using our product every single day. And as we continue to grow and as the industry continues to grow, we've had more and more questions from our current customers and potential customers asking us at trade shows and messaging in on our app, asking if we have recommendations for people as they scale their company of what they should be looking for as far as indicators of when they should move away from QuickBooks. When are they too big for QuickBooks? What are the differences in accounting softwares that would help them if it's not a QuickBooks solution? And so as an organization, our mission, part of our mission is very much to help the construction industry adopt all softwares, not just ours. And so we reached out to Pat Smith. He's got 21 years of experience in construction software and specifically accounting software. And so we wanted to bring him on today and have him talk to you guys. We're going to talk to him and have him present to us for about 20 minutes. And then at the end of it, we'll do a Q&A session. So please, any questions that you guys have as Pat is presenting, please message those in the Q&A center, and I'll go through those at the end. We'll read those questions, and then any questions that we don't get to, because there is a really good attendance on this webinar. If there are questions we don't get to, we'll make sure that Pat gets your email addresses and has the ability to email you directly any answers that we're not able to get to today. So thanks again for coming. We're excited to have Pat on with us as an industry expert, and we hope that you find this helpful in answering your question as far as when is a good time to start considering moving away from QuickBooks and the indicators that would help you do so, and find a good accounting software that fits the size of your company and the growth that each of you are experiencing, and congratulations on that growth. Pat, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate this, appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate everybody's time today. So like Derek mentioned, my name is Pat Smith. I'm with Foundation Software, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here first and foremost. So let's make sure everybody can see the little PowerPoint here. So like Derek mentioned, really the purpose of the presentation today is more educational. And when does it make sense to move out of generic QuickBooks type software into a more construction specific program? So we're going to touch on some real kind of high level topics, some of the main reasons that QuickBooks users do choose to upgrade to software designed for construction. So we'll go through a number of bullet point items to start with. I'm going to end up moving over to the Foundation system and just give you all a peek at some of the items that we'll address during the PowerPoint. So like I said, not so much of, hey, you need to all go buy Foundation. That is not the intent here. This is more in general, why does it make sense to move into a construction software? And then I'll just kind of use Foundation as an example of, here's some of those items. Now, as Derek mentioned, there's a little Q&A section within the Zoom webinar. So all of you can feel free to just jot those questions down. And there might be a few that we pick off during the presentation, but really for the most part, we'll just save those toward the end and just sort of address them item by item. So with that in mind, moving into the next slide here, I guess I'm going to start with why do that in the first place? Why graduate to a construction specific software? So we'll start there. Why would you in the first place? And then when would it make sense to do this, if at all? So the main reasons that we see QuickBooks users even considering that change is job costing. Number one item. So you all know as QuickBooks users, it's a decent program. There's nothing wrong with QuickBooks. It's solid accounting. It's easy to use. It does a good job. But we all know construction is just a different animal, and there's a lot of complexities within the construction accounting world. And of course, one of those being job costing. So when you get into a construction specific system, you really get the automated reporting, you get the real-time data, You eliminate spreadsheets, and you're going to hear me repeat that probably another 10, 12 times, but that really is just the reality of it, is getting rid of these spreadsheets, getting rid of the manual reporting, let the system do the work for you rather than having to double enter, triple enter to try to transpose numbers in disconnected spreadsheets and whatnot, which, it provides room for error and just takes time. It's just inefficient, and at some point, you just run out of time, and you're bombarded and just bogged down with spreadsheets. Payroll complexities, another item that is a main driver in a potential software change. So again, with construction specific, getting into unions, getting into Davis-Bacon, prevailing wage, certified payroll, these are all examples of generic software not really being designed to handle that type of functionality, whereas getting into a construction system, of course, unique to the industry, things like that, like the certified payroll, prevailing wage, typically pretty standard functionality within the construction software world. Third item here, billings. We all know a lot of specific billing formats within the construction world. So that's another reason, again, eliminating spreadsheets, eliminating the double entry, the triple entry. And then the fourth item here that I have listed is just additional construction functionality. So heavy construction, for example, a lot of these programs have equipment tracking, the ability to cost equipment to a job, the ability to track maintenance schedules. The electricals, the plumbers of the world, inventory, tracking material in the warehouse, getting into, quantities on hand and valuation of the inventory. And then, of course, the scheduling, project management, that is in huge demand these days. So everybody out there looking for integrated project management, for things like RFIs and submittals without having to have a bolt-on software or or some type of disconnected, again, spreadsheet that requires tracking that type of information manually outside of the program. So each one of these items we're going to dig into a little bit further here. With job costing, so a little bit more detail, versus just general job costing, what type of job costing, why is it, more effective job costs here versus something generic like QuickBooks. So WIP reporting, bonding reports, over/under billing, very much automated in the construction accounting world. So something like Foundation or any other program that's out there, you're entering and creating the job, you're entering transactions against that job. WIP schedules are automated. So showing percent complete, showing the over and under billing calculation, those numbers feeding into your general ledger automatically to update the financials, to account for the overbilling and the underbilling asset liability side of things. So the WIP reporting, you once again eliminate spreadsheets. A lot of folks out there, we see their CPA doing the WIP reports for them. CPAs are busy. Maybe you're not getting that data in a timely fashion. Maybe you don't want to dump all that on your CPA to take care of that for you. So the construction softwares of the world automate that WIP reporting. Now that feeds into, you see here, phase or cost coding. So from our standpoint, we get a lot of inquiries about, hey, listen, I'm on QuickBooks. I'm tracking my labor, I'm tracking my material, I'm tracking my subcontract expenses. I know where those numbers are, but I want a little bit more granularity. I want the ability to code my labor to both a job and a cost code, or some may call phases, cost codes, differences in terminology out there. But that's a big driver as well. Just the ability in general to enter a time card or an invoice or whatever the case is, and have that job and that cost code available, so those costs go to the right places. So a lot of that translates into, how is my estimating working? Do my estimators create budgets by cost code? And a lot of times they do. Then you've got the QuickBooks functionality where you really don't have true coding per se. So now all of a sudden it's apples to oranges. It's like, okay, these estimators, they're putting their numbers together by code, but on the accounting side of things, we're just tracking this generically. the labor, the material, and so on. So how do you know if you're over budget? How do you know if you're under budget? Where are you over budget? Where are you under budget? So these construction systems, very commonplace to have the cost coding within, and now those numbers are going to the right place, and use it for future bidding. Now we can tighten these numbers up a little bit. Hey, we went way over budget on this code, but we went way under budget on that code. Now the next job, the next bid that you throw out there, adjust those numbers, tighten them up a bit. Change order management. It again, very commonplace within construction systems. So no manual change orders that you have to write up, no having to enter a change order within Microsoft Word to build the actual change order form, then get into Excel to update the numbers against that contract or that budget to account for that change order, then feeding back into QuickBooks. Now how do I cost transactions to a change order? How do I know in general what my contract value is? Were there changes to it? And then the last one here, just general job profitability, and that is the goal here. Am I making money? Am I losing money? That's why we're here. We want these jobs to be profitable, and without the proper reporting tools, you just don't know. These are things that you might have an idea, but getting into the detailed job costing within these construction specific programs, for example, the cost coding with the labor, the material, a lot of these systems automatically cost burden to the job as well. So a lot of times we'll see, okay, I've got these reports in QuickBooks, I've got my spreadsheets, I'm accounting for the labor, which is great. I know where I stand on labor, but now my burden to account for union fringes, prevailing wage fringes, workers' comp, unemployment, construction software, it's smart enough to allocate that cost as well. So now you've got that labor, you've got all that burden that goes along with it, providing more true job profitability. So job costing, the number one reason that you'd even consider the change from QuickBooks to automate the process, to eliminate the spreadsheets, and just in general to provide more accurate reports. Moving on to the next one here, payroll. So we all know payroll, very complex in the construction world. Prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon. This is something that you typically do find in a construction system without having bolt-on software, without having to re-enter that data into a separate payroll software just to generate that report, without having to go to websites like LCP Tracker and EMARS, software designed for construction in our little corner of the world. We've got uploads to these websites, the automatic certified reporting that you wouldn't have to key any of those numbers in. It's, all the rates are built in, the fringes are built in. All the user is doing is taking hours from a BusyBusy, for example, imports it into Foundation. All of those rates are predefined, all those fringes are predefined. Let the system do the work for you, generate those certified reports, and physically in terms of the report itself, and or submit electronically to something like an LCP tracker. And sort of piggyback on that, union payroll as well. So you get into the union payroll, the rates, the fringes, the deductions. So any folks out there that are union based, that is something that really doesn't exist in QuickBooks. You can kind of get around it per se, not easy to do, but construction software, yeah, this is just an automated process as well. And another big one, multi-state payroll. So anybody out there that is working multi-state, that is pretty commonplace just in construction in general. So a lot of times it's, okay, let's set up the employee and we tell the system where the employee lives, and let's set the job up and we tell the system where that job is located. Typically that's it. Then these systems just know what to withhold, from a state withholding standpoint, what to calculate from an unemployment standpoint, workers' comp standpoint. So, Foundation, the equivalent systems out there typically handle that multi-state payroll very well. And then the last item here would be what I call apples to apples. So you're using a BusyBusy, and BusyBusy, with it being construction specific, there's jobs, there's cost codes. You go to import that into the system, bring it into QuickBooks, sure, it's going to show your labor, a little bit of your item costing and whatnot, but you get into a construction accounting system, and now this is more apples to apples, that same structure in a BusyBusy equals that same structure within Foundation. Now those, or again, whatever system you happen to graduate to, if you do make that change, now this is apples to apples. Those numbers are going to the right place. There's no guessing game in terms of where those labor costs show up. So job costing, always first and foremost. Payroll, huge driver within this this graduate to construction software change. Last item here that we'll get into on the PowerPoint is the receivable side of things. So not so much payroll related, like the folks here at BusyBusy would primarily focus on. This would be getting into things like AIAs. So we'll see a lot of folks out there. Okay, I've got my AIA set up in a spreadsheet, and I create the billing in the AIA. It takes me an hour to do it. Then I get into QuickBooks and I enter a billing to represent that AIA. Then I enter a billing for the retainage side of that AIA. Now all of a sudden you've got 3 separate entries, keystroke errors. It's just one of those. Eliminate that from the equation and run the AIAs directly through the software, which in turn auto-generate the invoice and automate retainage. So with construction software, there really isn't any workaround with retainage. It's an automatic process. So if there's retention on a specific job, it just knows what to do. When you run an aging report, for example, those retainage numbers show up in their own column. It doesn't show as a current due balance. It doesn't show as a standard invoice. Just no workarounds. That's really the goal here. Eliminate the workarounds, eliminate that double entry, and your reports are clean. They're not a bunch of goofy looking numbers that show as current due that really truly are not, considering it's that retainage balance. And then in my little example here, I've got time and material as another example. So a lot of contractors out there work on a T&M basis. Labor is billed by the hour, equipment is billed by the hour, material, subcontract costs are marked up certain percentages. So these are things that construction software typically automates. Hey, let's predefine all the billing rates for that customer. When I work that T&M job, now it's going to go behind the scenes, it's going to pick up those hours, it's going to apply the rates, and then it's going to kick that invoice out to the customer without the user having to get the calculator out, calculate all those different transactions, enter an invoice with 100 lines on it. The time material automation in these construction systems, it would save you a ton of time, especially for those that are heavy into T&M, versus your contract billings like the AIA. Which leads into when is the right time to graduate. So really the topic of this whole webinar presentation here, this is what we see as a company. So spreadsheets, when they start to run your company, you're pushing QuickBooks to its limits. So again, the job cost reporting, the AIAs, the certified payroll, if you are spending hours doing that kind of thing within spreadsheets and having all that disconnected data, that is really the goal here. Let's get these spreadsheets out of the equation, centralize all that data, eliminate the disconnect. And then also you can see here when you're spending hours on manual calculations. Certified payroll is a good example. Hey, I've got this guy that worked on a certified job and he was working 3 different trades. He's a laborer, then he's an operator, then he works as a foreman. I've got to pay this person 3 different rates in that day. Well, now there's fringes that are calculated on top of that. I've got to get the calculator out, calculate all these fringes, do all this stuff manually. Then I've got to fill that report out. So you're just creating more and more and more work. So these, again, are things that you just eliminate from that equation, and going back to let the system do the work, free some time up for yourself so you can focus on different areas and prioritize. So what we see is when contractors, and this is sort of that bottom line, let's get to the guts of it here. When contractors reach 2 to 3 million, that's about when we see users sort of pushing QuickBooks to its limits here. So I'm getting into that 3 million range. I'm spending hours doing all this stuff manually. And now it makes sense. Okay, I'm at a point where I can invest into a construction specific system. It's not going to break the bank here. And sort of get ahead of the curve here. So this number right here, this is pretty typical. And don't get me wrong, there's software out there that you could move into when you're doing 100 million, because that's really what you need when you get to that point. The flip side of it is there's software out there that you need, you can get into when you get into that, roughly 3 million range. So from our standpoint, we'll take calls from client or from prospective clients. Hey, I'm doing $500,000 a year. I'm doing $1 million a year. Well, you know what? You're not ready for this. You just aren't. It doesn't make sense to move into a system like ours. You need to grow a bit before you can really justify this change. Getting into that 3 million range, okay, now it makes a little bit more sense. Now we can again justify the expense and the investment, and have really enough volume to justify the change in general. Now, with that in mind, it's not like QuickBooks is going to stop working. You can run this thing. You can, it just doesn't quit on you, I guess, for lack of a better term. So we've definitely run into instances where, hey, I'm doing 10 million, I'm still on QuickBooks. Every now and again, hey, I'm doing 15, 20 million, still running QuickBooks, really pushing it to its limits. So yeah, it's hit or miss. I mean, it varies out there, but on average, yeah, that 2, 3, 4 million range, that's where we'll see a lot of interest sparked and sort of triggering that change. So with that in mind, before we get to Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Foundation, and I'm just going to zip through just a few examples of some of the items that I just covered, and then we'll just leave it open to some questions. So, and we'll follow that same flow, starting with job costing. So I'm going to jump into our executive dashboard here. And again, to reiterate, this is just to give you an example of what you can do with construction software. This isn't a foundation sales pitch. Maybe we're a good fit for you, maybe we're not. Maybe there's another system out there that you like way better than us. That's fine. This is just to give you an idea of what you could potentially do with a system, whether it's ours or somebody else. So in this example here, we've got this little dashboard that would tell you, hey, you're running 9 million in active jobs, and you've billed 6 million against those jobs. You've estimated 7.5 from a cost standpoint, and you're actually sitting at 5 million in terms of actual cost. And then you can see here, we've got our estimated and our actual gross profit. Now, in this example to the right, you'll see each of those jobs that account for those totals. Now, if I click this little button that says View Report, drills into a WIP schedule. So like I mentioned before, the WIP, very much automated. Here's your percentage of completion for each one of those jobs. Here's the calculation, are you overbilled, are you underbilled? So a good example of these numbers are just auto-generated. You run the report whenever you want to run it, have access to this data in real time without having to enter your transactions and then kick all these numbers over to Excel. Now in this example, if I click any of these jobs, it's going to drill down into a detail of that Midwest Turnpike job that I clicked into. Contract amount, what you've billed against it, estimated cost, actual cost, gross margin, change orders. I mentioned before, we'd manage the change orders within the system. So you hang on to the original contract plus those changes, shows percent complete as well. Now we talked a bit about cost codes. This example here, I'm sitting at 449 from an estimated cost standpoint, and I'm at 197,000 in terms of actual cost. If we click this little job cost detail link, now you're seeing the cost code breakdown of that 449 estimated and that 197 actual. And then you go further. Okay, I've got this 23,000 in cost for code 2010. Let's dig further. Well, here's your labor cost for that code. Here's your material cost, subcontract, equipment, burden. So you've got your codes and then what we call at least cost classes. Now, ultimately, I've got this 4,200 in labor, click into it. Here's all those transactions that imported from BusyBusy straight into the payroll module, and then in turn fed into job costing to account for that labor. Or if I go back a screen and I were to click, let's say material. Now in this case here, I've got a couple payable invoices that account for my material cost. Let's click into the transaction number. Here's the detail of that payable invoice. And then a lot of these systems these days have an imaging module that allows you to scan and drag and drop, for example. So in this case, if I click this little paperclip icon, this shows you an image of that material invoice or whatever type of transaction it happens to be. So it's a great example of the ability to automate job costing and the ability to drill down, access that detail, dig further and further without having to pull hard copies, without having to move into that spreadsheet for the 1000th time that I mentioned today. Again, this is all just automated process. So job costing, in our case, the dashboard, great tool. Payroll, just to touch on this real quick, I'd mentioned certified payroll, electronic, printed, very common for systems designed for construction to have not only certified payroll in general, but multiple certified payroll formats. So a lot of states these days, for any prevailing wage contractors out there, a lot of states are coming out with their own formats. So in a lot of cases here, they're embedded in. Now some just need the Department of Labor, just your WH-347. That's fine. You can just use the standard WH form. But those that have state specific, whether it's electronic or printed, again, another good example here. And then lastly, just to give you all a visual, one of the other bullet point items was the construction billings. And again, just so everybody can see here, very common to have the AIAs also built directly in. So in this case, you can print this thing on blank paper, auto-generates, feeds the invoice into receivables, shows that retainage separate, which I'll give you a peek here. So if you were to run an aging, these construction softwares will have a separate column on that aging report to show that retention without goofing up the report and showing a bunch of numbers that are current due, like I mentioned earlier. So construction-specific functionality translates into construction-specific reporting. All right, so complete crash course here. Derek, let's go ahead and dig in here to some of the questions, if you don't mind, and then yeah, we'll see what we have floating around out there. Yeah. So what I'm going to do before we get into that, Derek, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. So we'll bring you back up on the screen here if that's okay.
Sure.
And then yeah, we'll address those questions.
Okay. Well, thanks, Pat. Hopefully everybody that attended found this as beneficial as I did. You can see why we asked Pat to do this from an objective standpoint of really going into what construction accounting softwares can look like. BusyBusy being construction specific in time tracking, especially where our emphasis is time tracking, job costing, and doing work accomplished and quantity tracking. All of that information goes into these accounting softwares that are built specifically for construction. And so it makes the conversation much easier when the information that we are gathering has a place to go in the accounting software that we're sending them to. So we want to be respectful of time. We were planning on around 30 minutes for this. We do have a decent amount of questions coming in. So I'm going to start by reading through some of those. We may not be able to get to all of them. If we don't, I mentioned this at the beginning, but some of you may not have been on yet. We will send all of the questions to Pat, and he will email any of you answers for questions that we don't get to. The other thing that I want to make sure that you guys know from a communication standpoint, hopefully this was as helpful as we intended it to be. We do intend on doing some additional courses like this. We've considered some other construction accounting softwares to bring on and have share some information here, similar to what we did here with Pat. We want to be able to provide as much information as we can so that you guys can find exactly what you're looking for to really improve your business. Getting into the questions, we got David J, who asked, how do you integrate estimating into this accounting and job costing program, Pat?
Yeah, great question. So really the way these systems typically work is an export-import functionality. So, and that's what we do personally, and really the majority of the systems out there sort of work the same way. So the way that we approach estimating in particular is find something that's designed for your trade. You know, the GCs of the world, typically simple estimating, a lot of them use Excel, you know, getting into heavy construction, you know, then you're looking at bid to win, you're looking at HCSS, or you get into electricals that are looking into McCormick or Vision InfoSoft and these type of programs. So really the way that we approach it is we've got mapping tools to map to formats that estimating softwares kick out, and then we would pull that data into Foundation. So it just leaves us with a lot of opportunity to work with many systems out there, versus really being married to a particular program. Find what you like. If it can export, we can pick that data up and import it in.
Cool. Okay, thank you. This next question is a question that we get asked often, especially with us doing all of the time tracking, the job costing. We get a lot of clients who, when they're considering moving, they frequently ask us, when they're looking at other accounting softwares, how complex or involved is the conversion of moving away from QuickBooks into another accounting software program?
Yeah, so it's relative, I guess. But what I can speak on at least, and just so everybody knows, Foundation, we typically work in the mid-range construction market. So our bread and butter is anybody in that 2 to 3 million range, upwards of 50 million. We do have clients that are larger, that are doing 100 million plus and whatnot. But this is really just speaking from our standpoint. It's not a good time. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's not fun. There's a lot of work. It's a pain, and we're very upfront about it. It's like, hey, this thing doesn't set itself up. It takes time. It takes effort. There's a reason that you put that time into it initially. So on average, from our standpoint at least, it's about a 3 months turnaround from the day that you're set up with a new database until you're fully up and running. Our suggestion is always, whether it's us or somebody else, just follow your trainer's lead. None of these systems out there are just going to sell it to you and wish you the best of luck. You'd have a trainer, you'd have an implementation specialist that takes you through this process. On average, give yourself about 3 months, use the expertise of that trainer. So yeah, definitely work involved, not a walk in the park. Put the effort into it now, recognize the benefits later.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. And then I'm going to share that with our team here internally, because we do get that question a lot. And a lot of people will frame it in, hey, when we rolled BusyBusy out, it took us about a week to get going on it. What does this look like? So just to restate what you're saying, your expectation would be about 3 months, Pat, as far as a normal company that you're rolling this out with?
Yeah, that's sort of our sweet spot. The smaller companies, we can hammer those out in a couple months. Some of the bigger companies, they'll give themselves 4 or 5 months to go through this. But yeah, 3 months, that's about our average.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next question from Brett G. He said, their accountant is telling them to stay with QuickBooks and just use another application to track job profitability, job costing, etc. What are the advantages and disadvantages of adding supplemental application rather than switching accounting softwares? And Pat, I'm going to answer the first part of this, and then I'm going to let you answer it from an actual accounting software perspective. So I will tell you, Brett, that a lot of our customers, because we work with QuickBooks and we work with every other accounting software out there, a lot of our customers start by doing exactly what you're describing, because we solve those problems here at BusyBusy. We track job costing profitability. We have budgets in our product. We do the job costing side of things, and it can be project based, it can be sub-project based, it can be cost code based. Some customers will use tracking work accomplished in there as well, and others aren't interested in tracking that part yet. So as granular as you want to get, the nice thing is anything that's tying back to the people in the field, your laborers, that's all done inside of BusyBusy, and a lot of people will do that to stay at QuickBooks a little bit longer. And then there are a lot of people, again, the reason we're having this webinar, who that keeps them inside of QuickBooks for maybe another 12 months, 24 months, but then they realize the information that Busy is providing needs to go to a more robust accounting software where that information can be used to make better decisions more quickly. So if you want to speak additionally to that, Pat, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and you're spot on. So these programs that we see, and like you mentioned, Derek, it's almost like a patch. Like, okay, this will get me by for maybe another year or so, but then you still sort of lose that control of things. So yeah, we've seen a number of products. They just pop up, they disappear, they come and go. There doesn't seem to be a ton of consistency with, and not so much like in the BusyBusy world, but more job cost standalone plugins to QuickBooks. So don't get me wrong. There's programs out there that work. They do a fine job. But what we see is still disconnect, a lot of the exporting, importing, a lot of still transposing numbers into multiple places. So the QuickBooks integration, yeah, it's out there. We just don't see a ton of success, and that's not really to scare you away from going that route, because that might be perfectly fine for you. But maybe even getting into the volume, for a smaller company, stuff like that works fine. But as you grow a bit, then you're still creating a lot of manual processes that you have to deal with, and the headaches that come along with it.
Sure. Okay. Curious on this question. I know here at BusyBusy, we have a Procore integration. Celio S asked about you guys and your Procore integration. So the question is, do invoices and prime contracts integrate between Foundation and Procore?
Yeah, great question. So we do have a bridge sync program that we've developed with Procore specifically. Now, what we get into in terms of integration, not so much billings and invoices, more setup items, jobs, employees, vendors, change orders, cost commitments. So two-way street as far as our integration is concerned. If you set up a job in Foundation, it shows up in Procore, vice versa. Now, if you create, let's say, a subcontract commitment within Procore or a change order within Procore, it's going to feed into the system, into Foundation. The reason we don't get into much of the invoices coming over from Procore is for verification. With QuickBooks, sure, it's just basic transaction, but getting into construction software, a lot of times there's coding that needs to be done. There's just a little bit more that we want that would come out of something like a Procore. So yeah, Celio, if you want to circle back on that one, I can let you know. I've got a little data sheet I can send you. Here's what we integrate and what we don't, just to get on the same page.
Okay. Lila H asks, does the software create how much an employee cost an hour, such as adding workers' comp, health insurance, general liabilities? I know anytime anybody's using BusyBusy and Foundation together, we handle a lot of that from a labor burden perspective, because people can put in the hourly rate of the employee, and then they can also put the total labor burden in there. So that's all calculated, project-based, job-based, employee-based. How do you guys do it if somebody is using a software other than BusyBusy? Or talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm going to reshare my screen real quick here, because I'm going to show a visual on this one. I've got a report that I can show here. And yeah, this is the go-to report to see that data. So in this example, you can see I've got just a handful of employees here. How many hours did they work? What did they earn? Then it's going to calculate the FICA, the FUTA, the SUTA, workers' comp. You can see a number of other items, general liability, 401k and employer contribution, union, prevailing wage fringes. So in this case, yeah, this employee, he might earn $18 an hour, but you calculate the burden that goes along with it. Now all of a sudden, hey, this thing's telling you this person really costs you $22.18 per hour. So yeah, just automatic calculations to account for the burden, which would just add it up, do the math for you, and tell you what that employee truly does cost you, which really helps on the bidding side of things. You share this information with the estimators, then they've got a little bit more accurate data to work with.
Great,
Yep.
great.
All right.
And the last question I somewhat answered by this question. Brenda B had asked if it's required to use BusyBusy to integrate with Foundation. It's not. BusyBusy and Foundation are completely separate companies. The reason we'll do webinars like this is strictly educational, because we're genuinely looking out to make the greatest impact we can for each other's customers, for people who are not even customers of either product, but to really help just facilitate an experience where construction companies can find the best software for them. I will say, generally, people, when they're looking for a really good job costing, time tracking app that also does daily project reports, safety type reporting, injuries, those types of documentations, that's generally when people are using BusyBusy to track their time, because it also reduces a ton of liability. But just from a fundamental standpoint of, hey, if you're not using Busy, you definitely can still use Foundation. Next question David J asked is, can Foundation integrate with recurring billing for monthly and other recurring billings for a landscape company?
Yes, we can. Yeah, so recurring billings, really both on the payables and the receivable side of things. So yeah, so whether you're landscaping or any other type of trade, yeah, that is definitely something that we do provide. just to automatically generate for maintenance contracts and things of that nature. So yeah, as far as we're concerned, we do have that specifically within Foundation. Yep.
Okay. And then to wrap up a couple more of these questions and answer them quickly so more people can keep sending in. Perry B, you asked if Foundation is cloud-based, which it is. Brenda had asked, oh, this is a question more so for you, Pat, is just what type of training is offered by Foundation through the implementation of the product?
Yes. So what we offer, really two methods here: online remote training or in-person live training, and either way, working with a trainer. So everybody knows the way that we work as a company. We do everything direct with our clients. So we train our clients, we support our clients and whatnot, very similar to BusyBusy. So yeah, you can do training remotely with your trainer, which really the majority of our new clients do. It's easy, it's flexible, an hour here, a couple hours there, just working calendars with your trainer, or we can send that trainer face to face. So all user preference, all comfort level.
Cool. Okay. And David J asked if Foundation integrates, how does it work with Excel for estimating purposes? And that might be more company specific based on how they're doing estimating. Is there a generic answer you could give there, Pat?
There is, yeah. So we can import from Excel. So a lot of our clients have an estimating program, like a Bid to Win or like a McCormick or whatever it happens to be, which we can import from. But the truth is, the majority of companies out there still use Excel for estimating. It's the ultimate in flexibility. It's just what everybody still uses. So yeah, we do have imports where we can take budgets out of Excel, import them into the job, and then just populate that entire budget. So yeah, it's got the import from Excel just like we can do from actual estimating software.
Cool. Cool. And last question, and we will let you guys go. I know there's a handful of questions we didn't get to. We will make sure that those are answered. I did want to answer this last one, which is in QuickBooks, I can export to Excel for job costing. Does construction specific software typically offer those same export options, which I feel like you've already talked about, but wanted to directly speak to that question if you feel like there's anything different that you haven't already answered there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it is, could you export reports out of our system into Excel and then job costs it? Sure, you could if you wanted to. We're not going to stop you, but almost defeats the purpose of using our system for job costing. The goal is to eliminate Excel. So could you? Sure. Do you have to? No. You run the cost reports within the system and just take Excel out of that equation altogether.
Cool. Okay. Thanks again to Pat. Hopefully, I mean, I'm guessing by the amount of questions that came in, people found it really beneficial. If there are other accounting softwares you guys would like to hear from, please email us. We can get in touch with them, host a really similar webinar. But yeah, I think you can see from this, there's a lot to consider as your company is growing. And I hope this has helped with some of those considerations, and good luck to all of you as you keep growing and doing your day-to-day in your construction company. Hope you have a great rest of your day.